try to get.
Not for me, for this.
Oh, the volume.
You know what I'm saying? Because yesterday it was
It's
not
hard to
that-
read,
yeah.
hard to hear. Maybe make it closer. Anyway.
We're in a strange acoustic place here.
Yeah. Good morning. Today is the 20th of the first Adar and the, I guess, 29th of February. We have a 29th day in February this year. Yeah, it's 2024. Okay. So we were up to talking about anthropomorphisms, and I claim that that it's highly anthropomorphic. The terms are borrowed from human concepts in the empirical world, which makes it sound like, and he says the reason is because they are the only type of words a man can use in any meaningful way. The forms of spatial temporal concepts are imposed upon the mind of man who lives in the spatial temporal world, which obviously is true, but that's not the reason I believe that we find all this anthropomorphism in Kabbalistic texts. The reason is because two things. The first one is that Kabbalah takes the figures that we find in the Torah and it abstracts them. It makes them into archetypes.
Yes.
So Yaakov is not just Yaakov. He's Zah. He's Zer Anpin. He's much more than that. He represents much more than that. Avram is Arich. He's usually Arich. He's the parts of Arich. And before that, before the Rizal, so he was just Chesed and Yaakov was just Tiferes. There were all kinds of phases in understanding this. And the Torah itself is full of anthropomorphism. And not only is it full of a lot of anthropomorphism, but it seems that anthropomorphism is a basis for something. Now, again, it's not trying to say that God is something, has a hand, gets angry, or any of these things, but it's saying that this is much more than just because this is what we understand. One of the main concepts that distinguishes Kabbalistic thinking from mythological thinking is that mythological thinking is, or folk tales in general, are not meant to be sustained in the mythological sense, meaning the parable that's brought is not meant to be of value. You're supposed to discard it after you understand what the message was.
Yes.
But in Torah you can't say that. You can't just say that, okay, the hand of God, so now we'll discard that, because what we mean is that God acted. If you want to say God acted, you could have said God acted. But because we believe that Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy is exact, it's not just, the easiest thing in the world, and that's what modern thinkers do, is we just discard, because you say it's just a handle to get a handle on the idea, and then you can throw it out. So, but then you do the same thing in a certain sense with mitzvos. You end up doing the same thing, and you're saying, well, putting tefillin on is, you don't need the tefillin themselves. The point is that you feel obligated to God, or something like that. And then you can do away with all the acts. They're not exactly the same thing, because we have a principle that says that en mikra yotze midei pshuto, that a verse cannot be taken out of its plain meaning unless there's only one exception. Unless there's absolutely no mitzvah that comes out of it.
Okay.
If there's no mitzvah at all that comes out of it, so there are some opinions that maybe you could take it out of its plain meaning.
Right, but
Well,
in
usually,
other words, how do you fit Midrash into this? Midrash.
right. Midrash is the extension of the plain meaning. It's not meant. It's exactly, the Midrash is exactly trying to tell you what kind of parable can I give that will tell you what the.
It's still based on
Right.
the.
It's still based on the pshat
Okay.
at some level.
I understand.
So
what would be?
So what would not be
Based on pshat.
if I completely get rid of the pshat? If I come and say the pshat doesn't mean anything.
I got
So when you say Yad Hashem, so obviously it's a metaphor, but it has some plain meaning. What is the plain meaning?
You're coming, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know exactly what the plain meaning is. I just understand that I can't discard it.
Yeah, I fully understand what you're saying.
So-
Yet in mythology, so to speak.
Right, you
yes,
can
it's
just throw the whole story
yeah,
away.
yeah.
It's not interesting.
That's
What's,
right. You
what's
just
interesting
get it,
is the
yeah.
point. So it's true that we would like to understand the deep meaning, but we can't get rid of the plain meaning.
No.
So to say that it's only because this is what we understand, it's not exactly true. It's because this is the language the Torah uses. So to get back to the anthropomorphisms in Torah, the 50, it's famous that there are 50 of them. Are there really 50? Is there 60? That's a different question in and of itself. But there's many books in Kabbalah that are dedicated to this concept of 50 anthropomorphisms. The Ramak was not the first one, but he compiled a list and explained them. There were many before him who did the same thing. And everybody connected it to this concept of 50 gates of understanding. And these gates of understanding, the way to understand them is using the metaphor in Eishes Chayil, the woman of valor, where it says that her husband is sitting in the gates. Nodab b'sha'arim ba'ala, he is well known in the gates.
Right.
V'shivtoim ziknei aretz, when he's sitting with the elders of the land. So the gate here is the understanding. The elders of the land, ziknei aretz, is the wisdom. So we have understanding and wisdom. And that's what this is meant to do. The gates themselves are the way in which you capture the wisdom. So the wisdom is the pshat, is actually the pshat. And the gates of understanding are these supposedly anthropomorphisms,
Yes.
which somehow contain some wisdom in them. And I don't know how to tell you exactly how each one of them works. Many years ago, Rav Ginsburg gave a series of classes at the OU Center. It was called the Israel Center back there.
About that place.
You know that when it was on Strauss. Remember when it was on Strauss? Okay. So he gave a series of... Okay.
No, I don't like the place. It has its value, but there were people speaking there that shouldn't have been there, both good and bad. You
Okay.
understand? Yeah. Okay.
So they gave him a venue, and I think he gave 50 classes on the 50 gates of understanding. And in each one of them he explained, and unfortunately I have not gone over those classes yet, even though I have
Are they
them.
recorded?
We have some recordings, but we have mostly transcripts.
Oh, you have transcripts?
Yeah, we do have
'Cause that was years ago.
many
They were
years
in
ago.
Strauss
That was in the
many years
80s.
ago. Yeah.
I think 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, so let's continue. It is for this reason that the Torah, the prophets, and our sages use anthropomorphic language. As it is stated, the Torah speaks in the language of man. So all that is true, again, until you get to the 5 books of Moses. Because in the Torah we say that Moses' nevuah, his prophecy, is not metaphoric. It's not, these anthropomorphisms are something more. You can't just brush them away by saying this is just
That's
a...
what he's trying to say.
Yeah, he's trying to make it easier.
Make it easier.
Make it easier to swallow. I'm just saying that
Yeah, I understand, but it's
there's
not
more to swallow
much
here.
more, yeah, yeah.
It's a bigger bite than it looks.
And he knew that.
Yeah, I'm sure he knew.
Yeah.
Had they limited themselves to abstract terms and concepts appropriate to God, we would have understood neither the terms nor the concepts. And that is a very big deal. We talked about that actually last week, and I mentioned Tzvi Freeman's beautiful, beautiful essay on Chabad.org on this whole problem of, was Moses 5 meters tall? Was Pharaoh the size of a cucumber?
Yeah, I understand.
And then we said, of course,
I
when the
never
Medrash
listened
says
to
this.
that. In other words, who...
Oh, you weren't here? No, I think you were. I'm almost sure you were.
Maybe I don't remember, but which Freeman?
Tzvi Freeman.
Tzvi, I don't know who it is.
Tzvi Freeman's
That's about
been, he's been writing beautifully for years and years. He has In the World, Outside the World, whatever you call it. He has all these books of aphorisms. I know him well.
He lives here?
No, he lives.
No,
Now he
lives
lives. I thought he lived in Los Angeles, and I saw his son last time I was there. But somebody then told me that he moved to Atlanta. I don't know. It could be. The life of someone like him. He's what we would call in the past a man of letters. He's not a pulpit rabbi, so he doesn't have a steady, occupation here or there. He writes wherever they let him write. His life is very difficult because it's hard to. I mean, in the academic world, it's sort of like getting. I wish there was something like that. That would be an amazing thing in Chabad, that somebody would lift the gauntlet, and after they stabilized all the Chabad houses, that they would have chairs like they have.
A residence guy, I understand.
In the academic world, a chair is very important. Otherwise, you can't get good people. So there should be the Rashab chair of this. And then people, right? And then people could really dedicate. There's a number of people in Chabad that would really be very good at it. And
it's hard to be shluch and that. You might be right.
It's impossible. I don't think you can do both. So Eli Tauger, who translates very quickly and very good. So yeah, he doesn't have a pulpit. So now he's in Florida. I don't know how long he's been there, but he's he has to work all the time and because you have to work, you have to produce. You don't really have time to teach, to think, all these things that need to happen.
You really hit something.
No, I know. This is something that's been needed for a long time. I haven't heard anyone talk about it.
What a tremendous idea.
You can't develop this type of deep thought.
Like Cuban could make such a thing. And go to there's a lot of Chilim that he's close to, movie actors, stuff like that. They would love it.
Really?
An endowed chair.
Oh, okay. So
they come from the university world.
Great.
Endowed chair.
I'm all for it. I can make a quick list of 5 people that need the chair right away.
Yeah, I understand, but it's something that
Anyway,
they could raise more than they need. That's you know what I mean.
Yeah. Anyway, so he had this beautiful article just went up on Chabad.org, I think like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, maybe a month ago. And he started with the famous story of Shimon the Koifer, Shimon the Apikoris, the heretic or the apostate. Mm-hmm. And there was somebody who came to spy on the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe had his suspicions, but he wasn't sure. And he was very learned. And he said that he was from Vitebsk, when he was really from Vilna. So that I think the Alter Rebbe realized very quickly that it wasn't true, because he knew everyone.
Yes.
And he was very learned, so they made him a teacher in the school, in the cheder there. And after a couple of weeks that he was teaching, the Alter Rebbe said, I want to meet him. I want to interview him. So he came to him, and he says to him, so how do you teach when it says that when Esav came into Yitzchak's room, and after Yaakov had already left and received the blessings, and he says, and Yitzchak asks, who are you? And he says, I'm your firstborn, Esav. And then immediately Rashi says, and he felt tremendous fear. And the second thing he says is, and he felt like there was Gehenna that had entered the room.
Yes, I remember.
So he asked him, how do you teach this to the kids? So he says, I only teach the first one that he had tremendous fear, because he had given I don't teach the second thing about the Gehenna. He says, why not? The Alter Rebbe asks him, why not? So he says, because they're young, impressionable minds. I don't want to scare them. I don't want to. So then the Alter Rebbe gave it to him. Gave it to him. And he said, when you lie about where you're from, so you also end up lying about what it says in Rashi.
Ooh.
And then he said to him, what do you mean they're impressionable? They're impressionable because you don't know how to teach it. He said, what does it mean? It means that when Yitzchak heard that Esav was saying, I am your firstborn, and he knew it was a lie because he knew that Esav had sold his firstborn rights to Yaakov, so he was so affected by someone lying that it felt to him like Gehenna had opened up. That was how powerfully impacted he was by a lie.
Yes.
And that's not something just scary. That's something you need to
know,
right?
Yeah.
So that's how he explained it. So what is he saying? He's saying even though it's just a metaphor, Gehenna opened up under his feet, something like that, but it's a metaphor that's meant to connect you in a way that there's no other way. What do you say? You get very, very impressed by it. Very, very. It's terrible.
Yes.
It's like Gehenna opens up, and that's the feeling. So then he goes into a whole discussion about why all the metaphors and the anthropomorphisms in the Medrash, we still teach them the way we teach them. We don't try to just extricate. We first teach the metaphor, we teach the parable, and then we try to explain to the student, what does this mean? Each one at his own level. Because in the end, this is what will sink in. The metaphor is what's going to be remembered.
Yes.
Because it's what makes the impression. That's why we do it. So the words and ideas used have accordingly to be such as are adapted to the hearer's mental capacity, so that the subject would first sink into his mind in the corporeal sense, meaning in the physical sense, in which the concrete terms are understood. Then we can proceed to an understanding that the presentation is only approximate and metaphorical, and that the reality is too subtle, too exalted, and remote for us to comprehend its subtlety. What is he quoting from? Oh, he's quoting from Bechai. Okay.
What?
He's quoting now from Rabbeinu Bechai, from Chovos HaLevavos.
Chovos.
This is his explanation. The wise thinker will endeavor to strip the husk of the terms, meaning their materialistic meaning, this plain meaning, from the kernel, and will raise his conception step by step until he will at last attain to as much knowledge of the truth as his intellect is capable of apprehending. And because it's as much as I can comprehend now, and this is a big deal in Chabad, that all the parables that are spoken of in the Medrash and all the parables that are used in Chasidus by the Rebbeim are 100% something you can continue to lift your understanding based on. Meaning, you strip it of the exterior when you're young, and then you understand one kernel. Then you get older and you're wiser. You do it. You rehash it, and you come to a deeper understanding, and you can keep going with this because the parable contains, in some way, everything that all the different levels that you can come to. And that's a very big deal because I don't know if you follow them, but in the other class that they're learning in Hebrew now. So they came to a mimer, a very important mimer in Eter, where he explains it's a sefer of Maimarim, of essays from the Rebbe Rashab, where he explains that the parable is actually higher than what it signifies. The symbol is higher than the signified. Because of that, because it's not that these levels of meaning that I get out of the parable are an approximation each time. They do something that nothing else can do. They're growing with me, as it were. The parable, that's why we call it the parable a levush. It's a garment.
A garment, yeah.
It's a garment on the meaning. But this garment is like the garments that they had in the 40 years they were in the desert, in the wilderness. They didn't have to change them because they grew with them.
Yes.
So when you see that, you understand that the garment is in some way more miraculous than even the person inside, than even what it's containing inside, because it's growing with them.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. Whereas
the Rashab brings it.
Yeah, this is a very important mimer about parables. Thus, it is to be kept in mind at all times that the terms and concepts, so now he's back to, this is Shochet writing, need to be stripped of all and any temporal, spatial, and corporeal connotations. All and any anthropomorphic notions and concepts, strictly speaking, are non-ascribable to the divinity, as Scripture states explicitly, to whom then will you liken God, or what likeness will you compare to him? To who will you liken me that I should be equal, says the Holy One. Verses from Isaiah 40. Okay. Isaiah 40 is a very problematic chapter, of course, but we won't get into that now. This cardinal premise was adopted by Maimonides as the third in his compilation of the 13 fundamental principles of faith. And there he says that he's not a body, is no corporeality, and not a power of the body. V'lo koach b'guf. Of course, again, because of this whole thing with Moshe Rabbeinu and these anthropomorphisms in the Torah, this whole topic is much more complex than what he's bringing now, but it's a good place to start. Yeah. At the same time, however, it should, maybe here, now he's saying it. At the same time, however, and here's the caveat, like what I'm hinting at all the time. Let's see how far he takes it. However, it should also be noted that the anthropomorphic terminology used in Scripture, so Scripture here means the Torah, not the rest of the prophets. Okay. Scripture here should be limited strictly to the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. By the mystics and by others, is not arbitrary just because it is under the protection of the above qualification. So it's saying it's not you could have chosen any metaphor. This one is specific. Yes. This anthropomorphism is specific. Yes. Rather, these terms are carefully chosen, possess a profound meaning. And I think he's going to leave it at that. He's not going to say what it means. But again, that's the whole topic of the 50 gates of understanding. Yes. Yes. The rabbinic medrash.
And those are all from the 5 books.
Yes, yeah. Entirely, only from the 5 books of Moses. The rabbinic medrash and mystical writings abound with references to the idea that the world below in general and man in particular are created in the image of the world above. Right? This is a very important thing, that we have a mirroring, but in reverse, so that whatever you see below is a way to learn about what's above. In other words, it's not that the world above is created in my image. Right?
Wait, say that again.
That the way for me to learn about the world above, about let's call it the supernal world, is from looking at myself. Okay. What does this mean?
Yeah.
So this is based on a verse in Job that says that I see God from my flesh. What does it mean, I see God from my flesh? So it's usually understood that if I contemplate my situation, how I am, then I can make some understanding or get some kind of understanding about what the supernal world of God is like. In other words, that we mirror in some way what that supernal world is. But not to make the mistake to say it's the same. It's not the same. For instance, so we say that God is merciful. So what does that mean, that He's merciful? How do I know? Because I'm merciful. Yeah. So I know that He must be merciful also. But there's a big difference between my mercy and His mercy. So the one he brings in Tanya, he says, this is a good example of it. He says, in my mercy, I'm limited. Meaning somebody does something not nice to me, and he asks for forgiveness, I'll forgive him. He does it a second time, I'll forgive him. Does it a third time, maybe I'll still forgive him. 4th time, 5th time, 6th time, just leave me alone. But he says if a person can sin 1,000 times, the same sin, same thing exactly, and each time beg forgiveness from Hashem. And He forgives him every single time, because His mercy is infinite. Yeah. And that's an easy one, because it just means how many times. So the infinite becomes how many times. But you have other things which are God's loving kindness, His giving, which is much more difficult to understand. What does that even mean, to give an infinite amount? Like, how do you give someone an infinite? They're not even a kli for it. They're not a vessel for it. So what does it mean that is? So anyway, each one of these has to be thought about. But this is the basic concept, that the image that we see here in ourselves is a reflection of what's above. All the categories to be found in the world below and in man are homonymous representations of and allusions to certain supernal concepts and notions to which they correspond. He's taking it to a certain level. It can be taken to a higher extreme. Let's see if he goes there. If he doesn't go there, then I'll take you there. To be sure, he says, there is no likeness whatever between God and the creation. And on the supernal levels of the strictly spiritual realm, there are no such things as eyes, ears, hands, and so on, nor such activities and affections as hearing, seeing, walking, talking, and so on. However, all these spatial temporal activities and concepts do symbolize, and indeed for that reason come into being, in correspondence to the original supernal, strictly and purely spiritual categories. What's the problem here? The problem is that we're also spiritual. So you can't just come and say the world above is spiritual and the world below is corporeal. That doesn't make any sense because my world is both spiritual and corporeal.
Correct.
So what do you mean the world above is... So there's two options. One option is you come and you say, well, the world above is a reflection of my reality. My reality has both spirit and matter. So it also has spirit and matter. And there is such a thing, for sure. Because we have, okay, so there's an equivalent of it. But what's the equivalent? So the equivalent would be what we call light and vessel.
Light
and vessel.
I don't have my.
There's light and there's vessel. Oh, I have to end. So I guess we'll continue tomorrow. I have to go give a class at the girls' school.
Okay, you
on
once
Thursday.
a week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, twice a week, but in the morning once.